Huge thank you to Edmund Chan for sending these pair my way, so I can give you guys my unadulterated so I can give you guys my unadulterated review on the FD11s. So let's talk about it. Now, in terms of Fiio in general, I really do not have that much of a impression on Fiio other than the fact that when you are talking about Chi-Fi, one of the most prominent brands is this. Even though I say that, I really have not touched that much Fiio products, so to speak. I have tested the DAPs back then. The M11 is amazing, the M15 is amazing, but other than that, I really have not touched anything. And in terms of recently, I've tested the Fiio FH15s, which, to be very honest, the Kiwi ears are like 70 to 80% of what it is, so you get the idea of my gauge. But with all that being said, this is not about other Fios, this is just about this specific IEM. And also, just to remind everybody, my reviews are based on its price point relative to the IEM's performance, so I am not overly exaggerating certain things. So every time I test something out, it's going to have a benchmark of this certain price point, and that's it. I will not be using the M15s on this. I will not be using anything on this if possible, so that I can actually test it as it is. With all the ramblings done, y'all know my shtick. Unboxing time. To be honest, there's not really that much to talk about. This box is actually quite simple. You have literally a normal box with honestly not really that much design. I dig this, but usually there should probably be like a graph for people who want to know how does this sound like, but it is what it is. Anyways, pushing the box out of the sleeve, you get the standard KZ type of presentation, having a plastic cover covering everything, and you are gonna be greeted with the two IEMs housed inside here. And after that, taking the plastic cover off, you are being greeted with the accessories. You only get the cables and you only get a pair of tips, which surprisingly is very lackluster. Can I say that? Because I remember even the Astrotech Vesna gave me more than that. But regardless of that, I'm pretty sure even if they gave me 2 to 3 sets of tips, in most cases more than one, people who are in the audiophile game long enough, y'all probably are going to change your tips. And me personally, I'm using the spring tips right now because the original tips don't really fit me that well. But for the people who are making their first purchase on the Fiio FD11s, your mileage may vary, I guess. The build is, as what you would expect from a budget IEM in 2023, made of metal, solid. Why do I say that like it's already second nature? Basically, if you've noticed recently, the KZ-ZVX, the KZ-D5, I had the KZ-D5 and the ZVX, so I definitely know both of those are made of metal. So this is also made of a form of metal, if I'm not mistaken. I think Fiio stated is die cast alloy, something like that, and this is chrome plated on top of it. But regardless of anything, this thing feels solid. This thing weighs 9.79 grams, which is, I would say, a little bit on the lightish side for metal IEM, so this is quite good. Anyways, more notable things to mention. This thing, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's called something of a bionic shell type of shape, which, once you've looked at it, it actually looks like a conch, and it's actually quite nice. Me personally, I think it looks like a very small turbo engine thingy. I'm not a car guy, but y'all probably know what I'm talking about. The faceplate is decorated with, I think it's acrylic or plastic, some type of thing, with a snowflake inlay. From what I see, I think it's more of like a snowflake. And other than that, not really that much to talk about, other than one very specific thing that I would like to mention right now first: the 2-pin terminations. The 2-pin terminations are a little bit proprietary, depending on how you want to interpret it, because it has this oblique oval indent in it, where if you want to switch to other type of third-party cables, definitely you need to buy the cables that has protruded 2 pins. Otherwise, it's going to be a very big hassle for you to even try to use it, because in most cases, from my personal testing, it's impossible to even do it. So great build, slightly lighter in weight, so maybe long term when you're wearing it, it won't really fatigue you that much. And also your mileage may vary on cable rolling. Be very careful on that. And segueing on to the fit, how does this fit? Now, in terms of fit, I don't really have that much to say about it, because me personally, I have a very perfect fit with the BL03. This thing is also something along the lines of that, even though I know a lot of people have problems with the BL03's fitting. The no heat shrink ends of the 2-pin terminations really helped a lot. It actually, the no heat shrinks on the 2 pins end actually helps a lot in terms of, like, you know, making it actually go through your ear, and you can actually fit it quite well, and you can, you know, just tug it back so that it fits even perfectly. So for anybody who likes these types of small form factor IEMs, and you know that you fit very well to something along the lines of, and in terms of long-term wear fatigue, I wore this for 3.5 hours approximately last night, and before I actually go to sleep, it actually starts to have a little bit of fatigue. Mainly feeling like, you know, the weight's probably pushing it underneath. The weight's probably pushing it a little bit underneath on my ear. It's kind of like tugging a little bit down to my ear. But take note, it's 3.5 hours, and I'm just purely listening to music, and yeah, that's about it. So without further ado, this is the source that I use, and this is the graph. In very general, just by looking at the graph itself, it is a very V-shaped IEM. And personally, why I say that it's amazing is because of the fact that it has very good bass. Like very. Because I personally, I forgot to say one thing. Other than it being a V-shaped IEM and having a very good emphasis on the bass, not for the shelf specifically, just very good emphasis, very good control, very good technicality on the bass. This whole IEM in general, for some reason, it sounds a little bit analogy, if it makes sense. If you're going for cheaper IEMs, you definitely know the amount of resolution, clarity that you are getting for your IEMs, basically, because, you know, in some cases more than one, especially in the budget realm, your price definitely reflects the performance. This one is only around 35 US dollars if I'm not mistaken, and also 135 Malaysian ringgit. Surprisingly, for its price, this type of I would say lackluster performance. I say lackluster, but that's a very objective sound, I guess. Me personally, I find this sound very enticing, very intriguing. My friend mentioned that this pair is a little bit grainy sound, a little bit 8-bit type of sound, kind of digitally, like it doesn't really smoothen out that much in terms of the overall sound. Me, I find this more of a feature than a bug. It sounds very special. I find this type of coloration very unique, and it's actually done right, I guess, if you would call the fault of this thing being done right. Or maybe we're just nitpicking too much and we have too sensitive ears, basically. Recap of what I said: V-shape IEM, very good emphasis on the bass, specifically in its technicalities, and also it has a very slight analog-y sound across the board. That's it. Now, going on to the bass, which is what we are here for. This thing has very good amount of sub bass for once, in something that is within the budget realm. Other than, I think the KSX ZVX doesn't really have that much sub bass, to be honest. This thing has more. This thing has something along the lines of I would say maybe the Melee. Yeah, the triple Melee. It's been a long time that I mentioned that name. Good, very good sub bass. Quite a lot of mid bass. In very certain cases, when I use DACs, it might be a little bit too bloated, but if I'm directly plugging it into my laptop, it's fine. The mid bass is a lot, but it's fine. It's very well controlled. It has a body to it. It feels very rounded. Everything is so amazing. And the weird thing about this is that it still sounds smooth even though it has so much bass. It doesn't really sound bloated in any case. And I have made a personal note. I wrote something along the lines of, comparing this to the Kato, it has around 70% to the Kato smoothness. So take that as you will, as a very generic comparison. Going on to that, mids. How does the mid sound? Female vocals, to be honest, this is the first pair that I have found in a V-shape IEM and in an entry-level IEM to do one thing that I never expected most to do. It passes the J-pop test. This thing does not have any form of sibilance. But yeah, other than exaggerating that, in all seriousness, this thing does one thing very well, which is it actually does not have any form of sibilance at all when you're listening to very specific songs such as J-pop. If you want me to nitpick a lot, it technically has sibilance, but during the very high S's, you can hear that there is an actual threshold cutoff where instead of actually having a piercing S sound, it just fades away and it sounds lighter. Maybe in very certain cases it sounds slightly hollow, like it's not fully resolving, but I would take that other than, you know, having needles piercing my ear. Tonality on female vocals are very light and very sleek. I would say it has sort of a rustic feel due to the fact that what I mentioned just now with the analog sound, but overall it's very full, very rich. Male vocals on the other hand are maybe slightly more warm and laid back from what I can listen to, but other than that, I would say vocals, these do just fine. Instruments overall, I would say I did not make too much mental notes on that because I am still very surprised on the bass. Like bass, going back to the bass a little bit, very sorry, but bass notes, everything, like from bass licks, bass slaps, everything just sounds too good for me to even remember remotely, or, you know, have an initial impression of like, yeah, I'm gonna notice more of the mids now. I'm still encompassing my whole, it's really most stuff that lies in the bass region. The bass region is really just that good. Mids, in my opinion, in terms of the mids, after listening to me rambling about how good the bass is, I would say in general it's a little bit, you know, subdued on the behind in comparison with the bass, but other than that, it's still very good. I remember pianos being very okay. I remember synths specifically being, again, sheen with those light, sleek characteristics of it. And because of the fact that, like I mentioned, this thing has no sibilance, metal shreds and guitars does not sound that hard. It sounds a little bit softer. It sounds more laid back. So yeah, going on to the treble part, this thing performs exceptionally well on the treble part as well. Why do I say that? It's mostly owed to the technicalities again, but I'll mention things that are non-technicalities first and then we'll go into that. In most cases, we often associate ourselves with listening to things that have, you know, slightly heated up trebles, something with very peaky highs, stuff like that. This thing does drums and guitar solos very well because the higher it goes, the slightly further back it pushes. What I mean by that is that when you're listening to very crazy drum breaks, something along the lines of, like, you know, subduing it just enough so that it doesn't sound fatiguing, but it doesn't, you know, take away its presentation from you, something along the lines of that. It's very well balanced in terms of how this Fiio FD11 perceives anything within the treble region. It's like in between of everything, but not presenting out too much. It's a very good dynamic pair is what I'm saying, which I think let's just go into the technicalities right now, because I think the technicalities of this pair is owing a lot to its performance in terms of how the bass, the mids, and the highs are doing well. The dynamics on this pair, surprisingly, I've never heard something that is so well controlled in terms of how it perceives sound throughout the frequency response, without making anything sound like, you know, it's a little bit off, without making any certain element feel like they're missing out on something. Everything is being controlled very well, everything is being presented very well. Surprisingly, even though I say this, usually you only find this in more balanced pairs of IEMs. This pair of IEM is a V-shaped IEM, but it still controls and presents everything very well. I'm more surprised by the fact that the V-shaped, the mids are not that recessed like, you know, certain pairs of V-shaped IEMs, which is quite common based on the tuning. But yeah, other than that, other than the very good dynamics, soundstage and imaging. Soundstage, it's average, but I would say one very certain thing that I've noticed on the FD11 is that it has height. As it is, this thing has height. Definitely the soundstage depth is very lackluster and the width is just, you know, so-so. But if you are pairing it with a good standalone amp, something like a tube amp, something like, you know, maybe an M15 or something like that, it definitely pushes it a little bit far. But as it is very decent. It is very good. Imaging wise, it also splits everything apart very good, but this is more catered to the point where if you have better decks, I would say, because like I mentioned, this thing doesn't really have that much depth. So if things get a little bit too much in the song, you'll definitely feel like more and more things are stacking up to the point where in the end everything feels a little bit congested, but other than that, it's perfect. Detail retrieval, I would say this thing really helps the bass region and the high region very well, mainly because of its ability to extract certain nuances of the notes, something along the lines of having layered reverbs, something along the lines of having decays, not only on the bass notes but also on the highs, which, oh yeah, I forgot to mention, treble extension is good, it's decent. Mainly, I would say it's very well accompanied by the decay, which is, again, I am very convinced that this is more related to the detail retrieval part. Other than that, vocal ensembles also sound very great due to the fact that you can hear the layering done very well if there is any layering. So that is one thing that I would like to mention. So overall, in conclusion, I would say the Fiio FD11 is honestly quite a very good pair for what it's worth. It's only a little bit over 100 ringgit. It's only about 35 US dollars. And this thing performs exceptionally well. If you don't really care that much about soundstage and you only want something that's very enjoyable, specifically enjoyable bass that does not translate directly in terms of like how high its bass shelf is, but this thing is more related to its technicalities, its prowess, this pair is a no-brainer. Again, I'm still very surprised by the fact that this thing performs exceptionally well in terms of its bass directly plugged into my laptop with no DACs. I'm still I'm just very surprised of this whole thing. But anyways, that is it for my review. Thank you for watching, and there's going to be more coming soon. I'm a little bit more free in terms of my schedule, so stay tuned to everything. Thanks for watching once again, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Where is my camera lens? I cannot find it.